Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I'm just back from the WSM trade show. And let me tell you, I've been to current renditions of the OR show, I went to the outside festival consumer show type thing, but WSM is the only show that looks and feels like a real trade show because it is one. It was great, and 90% of the important brands were there, and the ones that weren't, well, in my opinion, that was a big mistake. I mean, this is an industry, and it's rad to be a part of it instead of just focusing on the bottom line. It's bad enough that a lot of brands out there are competing with their retailers. What do I mean by that? Well, I went to the Elan presentation at the show, and the message that Elan hammered home time and time again is that they aren't competing with their dealers. There was one slide in the presentation that showed a ton of different brands having prices online much lower than the shops that sell their products. I knew this was happening, but I didn't realize how bad it actually is. I mean, there was a time in this industry where if a brand decided they were going to sell online, dealers would cut orders and get pissed off. But then brands started selling direct, and there were programs like Shopatron that cut in dealers into sales in their territories, and some of the dealers really appreciated that. They'd get a spiff from the brands and they were all stoked. They were like, yeah, these guys are looking out for us. But then there were other retailers out there who were like, this is the beginning of the end. They're eventually going to be competing with us. And sure enough, now in the marketplace, brands are out there competing with their dealers, and it's commonplace to see that, to see brands breaking MAP pricing and directly competing with the stores that help build the brands. It's sad. And the crappy part is there's so many good people in this industry. And every time I go to a show, I remember how awesome we are as a collective. But really, it's not the younger people saying, let's sell direct, let's screw our dealers and make some really long margins. It's the people up top. We've seen greed on the resort side, and now there's greed from the brand side. And I'm just stoked that the brand that sponsors this podcast is the brand leading the charge in supporting your local ski shop, because you know what? Ski shops are way more important than we give them credit for. And if the brands keep undercutting what used to be their lifeblood, ski shops are going to become nothing more than service shops, and that would be a shame. But I get it. Brands have a shit ton of inventory and they need to get rid of it. Here's my advice. Figure out your program. Build products to what the market can bear. Just because your parent company wants to see 10% growth year over year, that's not realistic or sustainable. So figure it out and make the industry landscape not only healthy for your brand, but also healthy for the shops that help make your brands matter. So that's my complaint about the industry. And the show? It was rad. Everyone has great new products, and it seemed like an evolutionary year, not a real revolutionary one, which is fine. Not every year has to have game-changing technology that's going to shake up an industry. This year, the big technology everybody's talking about is BOA and double BOA, but I don't need to talk about that anymore because everybody's feeds are full of that. But like I said, the show for me was all about seeing good people and friends and pitching my podcast to people and letting them know that I now sell stickers. And everything worked. It was a very productive show for me. I want to thank the folks at Revo for the sick goggles they gave me. I also want to thank the dudes at Gravity Grabber for the ski rack. I have that in my basement, and my skis are now hanging up instead of laying on a ski bag, which is awesome. I also want to thank Josh Lubeck at NEMA for hooking me up with another round of vitamins. If you don't use NEMA, you don't have the energy that I have, and that energy led me to the best trade show surf and turf dinner that I've ever had. And I know I've mentioned it before, but my favorite steakhouse in the world is the Capitol Grill in Salt Lake City. It has that classic steakhouse feel that I love, and the owner, Bill Bowler, well, he's the best. Think a dude who loves skiing, and he's got an amazing personality, and he wants everyone to feel at home at his restaurant. Beetlejuice may be the ghost with the most, but Bill is the host with the most, and that is one of the cheesiest thing I've ever said in my intro, but I'm going to leave it in there. I joined Roy Tuscany and the High Fives Foundation crew for a meal. And you know I love Roy Tuscany and Jesse Murphy from the High Fives Foundation. It's always a treat to go hang out with them. And while great meals are incredible, it's all about the people. And the table that we had and our dinner was insane. I had the bone-in filet with the black garlic, and it was a 10 out of 10. So were all the apps and the desserts. I mean, when you go to the Capitol Grill in Salt Lake City, it's more of an experience than a meal. And I really mean that. And that experience ended at 8:15. And you may be wondering, wait, I thought you had the surf and turf. Well, I did, but the surf came next. because I left the Capitol Grill and I got in an Uber for Ruth Chris Steakhouse. I walked into the private glassed-in room in the back and I met up with the already seated Elan crew for the last Alan Davis dinner. I phoned in my lobster and beer order from the Uber, so when I got to our room, there were 15 people there sitting down, listening to stories of some of my darkest secrets. What a way to enter a dinner. It was so embarrassing. But there was a beer waiting for me, and my lobster arrived 20 minutes later. It really was the best of both worlds food-wise, and the best of both worlds friend-wise. Like I mentioned, I love Roy Tuscany and Jesse Murphy from the High Fives Foundation, and it was great to spend time with them. But then when I got to the Elan dinner, it was two more dudes that I love, Jeff Matura and Ben Fresco. Jeff is the smartest marketer I know. He was a mentor to me when I was at K2, and he's just a legendary industry guy. A guy I'd love to have on the podcast, but that's not Jeff's style. I will get Ben Fresco on the podcast one day. He's Jeff's right-hand man, and he's a hell of a marketer himself and an awesome guy all around too. So we're at Ruth Chris. I had the lobster, and while it was good, if you're picking a steakhouse in Salt Lake City, you can go eat at Ruth Chris, or you can have a dining experience at the Capitol Grill. Both of them are going to cost you about the same, but I'm going to the Capitol Grill every time. But like I said, while nice dinners are cool, it's all about the people. And at both the High Fives and Elan dinners, I was with all-time crews who I really do love. I usually don't tell 4 dudes that I love them, but Friday night I did. Speaking of telling dudes that I love them, Tom Moreno, another good friend who works for Solomon, he helps me out with this podcast. He's my final set of ears, and he lets me know if anything sounds off during the recordings. It's a thankless job, so when I go to Salt Lake City, I take Tom out to dinner. And for some reason, Tom always picks a super romantic restaurant. This time it was Finca. For this one, think it's a building in someone's backyard where they serve delicious tapas. It was fantastic, and if we were a couple, that dinner would have sealed the deal. But we aren't, so Tom dropped me off at my hotel, and that was that. All in all, it was an awesome trip that reminded me how amazing this industry is. If you haven't been to a show and you can get a badge for this one, I highly recommend it. From what I found, all the other shows are a waste of time and money, and this one feels like a real trade show. That's really all I can say about trade shows. Now, we need it to snow everywhere, so my guest this week can go out and get the mind-blowing footage that he's known for. While Josh Daiek hasn't been in a huge movie that makes him a household name, he's every skier's favorite skier, and he skis faster than anyone, and he still hunts big cliffs in his 40s like a younger Seth Morrison. And that's a bold statement, but anybody who watches Josh's footage, you're going to see what I mean. Before we get into the podcast, I want to thank you for listening each week. It's greatly appreciated. What's also greatly appreciated is when you star rate the podcast wherever you listen, and if you tell a friend about the show. That really does help it grow. Finally, the most important thing that you can do for me is listening to my sponsors' ads and buying their products. The brands who make this show happen are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Best Day Brewing, and Ski Idaho. Now, it's time to chat with Josh Daiek. You're from Rochester, Michigan, and does that make you a Detroit Lions fan?
You know, I hate to admit it, I'm not much of a sports fan at all. When I was a kid, the Detroit Red Wings were really good and winning the Stanley Cup in the late 90s there, and that was really fun and exciting. So, if anything, I was a hockey fan. I've never been big into football. I grew up playing soccer, so.
All right, well, I was going to give you like a little layup to say how sad you were that your team was like supposed to do so well and they let your whole city down. But I'll start out with something different. I hear you have a fetish for sheds. And what's the story of you and like 8 sheds in your backyard?
Oh, dude, just doing what I can to get by, man. I got a lot of toys and my house is pretty small and we got a single car garage. So you do what you got to do to make ends meet. So that's my story with the sheds.
Is it a bunch of like tough shed plastic ones out there that you're putting shit in?
No, bro. I'm a carpenter, so I like to take a little pride in my work. And we got this whole like rustic kind of look theme going on in the back. A bunch of recycled fence boards and old recycled material to kind of throw this kind of look together. And I think it looks cool back there. So it's all done tastefully. Let's say that, Mike.
Fair enough. And it sounds like carpentry is something you probably learned from your dad, who's like a hardworking Midwesterner. And it's something you've done your whole life. It sounds like the attention to detail that you pay with carpentry and chefing or cooking food, from what I hear, are two things that people may not know about you, but like you really take pride in both of those things.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't say I'm much of a chef. Like, I certainly don't take a ton of pride in that. But when it comes to carpentry and my work, whether it's skiing or carpentry, then yes, I'm very proud of what I do. I take a lot of pride in it. At the end of the day, I think whether you're producing ski films or remodeling someone's house, it's like I want people to be psyched on it and I want to be psyched on it. So, yeah, it's true to say that I do take a lot of pride in my work and I work super hard. And yeah, I'm proud of it all, to be honest.
Okay. And you grow up in the greater Detroit area, and it's like 100 Daieks, I feel like, or maybe different last names, but between uncles, aunts, cousins, family, like how many people are you in your clan?
Yeah, man. My dad's one of 9.
Whoa.
So yeah. So, in that his era and being Catholic, I think relatively speaking, he and all of his brother and sisters had like 5 kids each.
Huh.
So just simple math, there's like 45 of us Daiek cousins, and we come from a tight family. So we'd always have big family gatherings, and that's the way we were raised, is like family's number one, and that's the people you can always lean on. And that was an amazing blessing, and I'm super grateful to have that in my life. And some of my cousins are still my best friends to this day. So yeah, man, it was really cool. That's definitely one thing I miss about being home and back in Michigan.
And it seems like a lot of people these days would describe you as psycho but calculated. And that has to start somewhere. Were you like the little psycho kid who had no fear and had all these cousins pushing you to do crazy shit?
Huh. That's interesting. I don't think so. I think when I was in high school, I feel like I didn't really fit in much. And, of course, I was kind of lumped in with the other kids that didn't fit in super well. And it was kind of the jackass era, too. So we were kind of doing that stuff like jumping off rooftops and just doing dumb shit. I don't know if it was for attention or just because we're like, whoa, this is crazy. And you get a little adrenaline rush, or I couldn't quite tell you exactly why, but that's just kind of what felt right to us and what was fun for us. So
the beginning of catching air for you was more of a jackass influence than anything else?
When you say that, I think back to like being on like a river trip or something with my family or aunts and uncles, whatever. And we'd always find like little things off the riverside, like little embankments. And we really loved, just like me and my cousins loved like jumping off those things. And I remember it was just so fun, that feeling of free fall. So I think that's probably more like where it starts, but not even like that wasn't even like cliff jumping. I'm talking about like a 10-foot embankment. So I think it was really just fun and exciting. And I think like with the first time you go skiing, like I've been seeing videos of my nieces and nephews, and, most little kids, once they start to figure it out, they just want to go straight. Just that feeling of the wind in your ears and that acceleration. You're like, whoa, this is just exciting and new and fun. So I think that's probably what it was for me a lot when I was younger. But then, yeah, like in high school when we were just being dummies, and like, I remember we'd like go into the gym and steal like the pads from the gymnast team, and we'd go air off the top of the bleachers into the pads and stuff. And so it's kind of jackassy, but also like not trying to hurt ourselves as much as like the jackass dudes do.
Okay. And when you think of your whole tribe, the 45 cousins and everybody else, I don't want to call you famous because you're ski famous, but are you the most known Daiek, or has somebody else gone on to do bigger things?
Oh man, my cousin is crushing it. My cousin Aaron Bird, clearly a different last name, but he's like training MLS professional soccer players, and he's a professional soccer player himself, and he's really carved out a name and really cool business for himself. But, I think a lot of the Daiek tribe is pretty well established within their communities. Like you said, I don't consider myself famous. Like a few people know me, but I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, dude. I guess I don't feel like famous at all or anything.
Yeah, no, you're ski famous and you're definitely humble. And the funny thing is you're ski famous, but you didn't come from a ski family. You guys would go ski a couple times a year. You weren't even weekend warriors, but there was like a pivotal moment in your life when you go to Colorado in 5th grade. Where did you go and how did that change you?
Yeah, we went to Winter Park and, it's funny thinking back. I remember it was really cool and I was so like inspired by the mountains. And I remember when I came back from that trip, we had a great family ski trip. I do remember having like this meltdown moment where I like lost a ski on this mogul run and my whole family like skied around the corner and I couldn't see anyone and I couldn't get my skis back on. And my dad had to hike halfway back up the hill. And, being Michiganders, he probably had to hike like 500 vert.
Yeah.
The ski hills aren't even that big where we come from. So I remember he was kind of frustrated with me. But I go back to what she asked. Like, my mom still has this book I wrote in 5th grade. Like, one of our school projects was like, what are you going to do when you're older? And I wrote this book about how I'm going to move to Colorado and live in the mountains. And it was obviously all pivoted off that trip. And yeah, that was a cool moment. And I don't know exactly what it was that grasped me at that moment in my life and what like really captivated me, but it was something, man. And I'm grateful for it.
But it's not like you come back and ski a shit ton. It's like you get back and when you think about it, what kind of things were you doing? Because you said you were an outcast. So were you skateboarding, BMX, inline? Was there anything that you did before you joined the high school racing team?
Me and my buddies definitely like to inline skate. There was this one little skate park that we would go to. It was almost like a latchkey, you know what I mean? Like where parents could take their kids after school or something. And so I forget how we would get there, but there was this little place that had a little half pipe. And I remember my buddies and I would go skate there for hours. We had so much fun. And also we started like grabbing candles and trying to melt our own wax and make wax for like curbs and handrails and that kind of stuff. I was never like really great at it, but we certainly had a lot of fun doing that stuff. But then I played soccer, man, and I was playing on like a select soccer league and that just eats up a lot of time. It's like tournaments every other weekend and traveling here every weekend and weekdays, soccer games and practice. And so that really consumed a lot of time of my childhood. And I played that until I was like, a senior in high school.
And then you also got into the ski team. Like you said, it was like the ski race team. You joined it like your sophomore year. Was it pretty much just a way to get to the ski hill?
100%. At that time, I didn't have a license or a car, obviously. And so me and my buddies joined the ski team to catch the bus there. And this was like right at the time when the free ski revolution was kind of happening with the new Canadian Air Force and Johnny Mosley and all of it. And so they're starting to build the terrain parks, but they were snowboard parks. So I remember we used to get like hated on, but we would just skip practice. Like I never had any like formal coaching or anything like that. But we'd skip practice and just go hit these god awful like bulletproof ice jumps. They just like blow snow right there and like create this mound.
Yep.
And then just put a lip on the other side of it. I remember, dude, we used to get so hurt. Like we'd just be overshooting the jumps nonstop. Like things you can only get away with when you're 16 or whatever.
Well, you think about like the way you ski now, and we're going to talk about it more and more throughout the podcast, but you're all gas. There's like no speed checks, no anything. Was it like that for you back then too? Was it like, even like with inline and everything that you do you kind of have one speed with everything?
I don't think so. I think that's come later in life. And I think that's more a product of competition, doing big mountain comps for like a decade. I think that's really what kind of shaped and molded my skiing into what it is today.
Kind of when you have one run to actually impress a lot of people and your run better be fire, and knowing you, it's like you were either going to get a podium or crash, and that's kind of how you roll.
Dude, I'm afraid so.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that mentality. That's what people love to see.
Yeah, totally. I wish I could have. I think I'd be a smarter competitor now, but who knows? Maybe not.
Back when you're getting into that snowboard park in the Midwest, did you have twin tips back then?
No, I didn't. I wanted a pair of 1080s so bad, right? Like any kid did. because they had just come out. Maybe they were a couple years old. And I remember my first set of twin tips because my parents, like my dad went to the ski swap.
Yep.
And he got me these Rosignol Bandit X,
Uh-huh.
which was the hot all mountain ski at that time. And so I had them for like a couple months. And then when my dad wasn't home, I boiled some water. My brother and I like put the tails in boiling water for, I don't know if it's 10 minutes or whatever we did. And then we like clamped it to a bench and then like lifted the ski up. So we kind of made our own twin tips. And then of course they start delambing. So we we're like putting rivets in them to hold it together. But that was my first pair of twin tips. But it was cool. I love that memory.
And then when you think about it, like the two huge things that were going on, you brought up the new Canadian Air Force. You also brought up Johnny Mosley. Which had more of an impact on you, those Canadians or the 360 mute heard around the world?
Oof, I think the 360 mute heard around the world, man. That was such a pivotal moment in my life. Like, I'm honestly like my hair's starting to stand on my arms just thinking about that moment. And like I said, we weren't like a huge ski family. My dad loves skiing. My mom, I think she likes skiing, but she's more doing it for the family and my dad. So we would watch the Olympics and we'd watch the downhill and we'd watch the GS and we'd watch all the events. And I'll never forget that, man. Johnny Mosley doing that 360 mute. My jaw was dropped. I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, I want to do that. And so it was like, every time I went skiing after that, we were like trying to jump off a little mogul side hit and do mute grabs or try our little wheezy 360s or whatever. It was super fun and that's super inspirational.
Were you skiing a lot of moguls then too?
Trying to, Mike.
Okay.
Like trying, but certainly not like bumper style, like with any finesse or anything like that.
Okay. And then by the time you get to be a junior, you start driving, your buddies start driving. Are you able to go ski like every night skiing?
Yeah, of course. We started driving to the resort more and we skied like almost every weeknight, you know, like the practice nights for sure. And then we go on other days. But we would just get so hurt all the time, dude. We'd just go hit jumps for like an hour and overshoot and like backslap and just like trying to learn 720s. And, you know, the transitions just weren't built right. And they'd have these nice boosty lips to just like really hard to land jumps. Yeah. That's the biggest thing I remember. We were just getting demoed all the time.
And was it like one of those mountains where you're just like tearing your gloves up on a rope toe and just hitting your like 2 jumps in a row and then doing it all and you can do like 5 laps in a minute?
Yeah, that's it, dude. Yeah, the rope toe is sweet. You know, there's a little skill to it. You come carve into it and keep your speed going back up as long as there's no one falling in front of you. But yeah, that was fun. I love the rope toes.
And then you want to move out west after that 5th grade trip. You go visit your cousin in Tahoe when you're in high school, and that's where you end up moving. And is it pretty much like you go on this trip, you ski POW with them for like a week, and you're like, holy shit, I love this so much. I'm going to do this the rest of my life?
Really, it just checked a lot of the boxes. Like you said, I came to visit my cousin Todd, who lived in Lake Tahoe, for my senior spring break. So like all my buddies are going to Cancun and everyone's going to some like beach to parties. And I was like, dude, I'm going to go skiing in California. They're like, what? California? What are you talking about? So I went and visited my cousin Todd and he's like, dude, what are you doing next year? Like, you should come here. There's a community college here. And, you know, we've got all these parks. It was that era where everyone was trying to have like the sickest park in the world, right?
Yeah.
So it's like Heavenly had this insane park. Sierra Tahoe had this insane park. Kirkwood had this insane park. And he is based in South Lake Tahoe. That's why I'm naming South Lake Resorts. And I went and skied those parks and I was like, holy shit, this is mental. That was the biggest thing for me. Like, I wanted to go skiing. I wanted to ride sick terrain park because I was really into hitting jumps at that point in my life. And I could go to school. Just being a kid out of high school, I think it's common not to know what you're supposed to do and feel like you have to go to college. So I think that's really what brought me there. I had a place to stay as well. So it was just too easy not to. It was like, sweet, I can do all these things. That's awesome.
It's time for my first sponsor break, And I'm excited to bring Ski Idaho into the sponsor mix. People have been shredding Idaho ski resorts for over 100 years. It's the home of some of the best skiing and resorts in the lower 48. Think 19 ski areas with epic terrain and shorter lift lines. That's right, unlike a lot of places, when you ski in Idaho, that means you aren't going to spend half of your day waiting in lift lines. And Idaho skiing is affordable, with over half the ski areas offering day tickets for under $60. That's hard to beat, and between the terrain you're going to find at destination resorts like Sun Valley, Grand Targhee, Tamarack, Schweitzer, and Silver, or day areas like Lookout, Brundage, Bogus, Soldier, Kelly, Canyon, and Pebble Creek, from groomers and bumps and terrain parks to Powell and glades to backcountry, Idaho has it all, and it's the best kept secret in North American skiing. It's skiing like it used to be, with lots of independents, including mom and pops and nonprofits. To find out more, head on over to skiidaho.us. Next up, it's Elan Skis. And while I could tell you all about the new award-winning Ripstick ski models and then push you to demo them at your local shop because they'll make you have more fun on the mountain, I'm just going to talk about your local shop. There's something special about stepping into your local ski shop. The smell of the freshly waxed skis, discussion about where to find the best skiing, and expert advice makes these shops more than just a place to buy gear. We at Elan believe that ski shops are the soul of skiing, a place where skiers can come together for genuine human connection. And that can't be replaced by going online. Going to a ski shop is an experience where you want to connect with a like-minded person who understands what you're wanting to do and wants to share their knowledge with you so you can have a good time doing something they love to do too. Shops are among the last authentic pieces of the ski community we have left. And here at Elan, we want you to support your local ski shop. You can find our list of dealers nationwide over at our website, elanskis.com, and remember, support your local ski shop. Last but not least this round is Best Day Brewing. And with snow season here, skiers, snowboarders, weekend warriors, tubers, sledders, snowmobilers, snowbikers, you get it. The doers of winter are getting ready to shred. And post-shred, it's all about après. And this year, do après the right way. Forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, forget about getting in trouble on the way home. Because with a beer from Best Day Brewing, you get all the flavor of your favorite beer, whether it be a West Coast IPA, a hazy IPA, a Kolsch, an Electro Lime, or my new favorite flavor, Nature's Pills. And you don't have to worry about anything but having your best day ever. Blind taste tests have proven that you won't be able to taste the difference between a Best Day and your favorite alcoholic beer. Really, the only difference is you're going to notice how good you feel in the morning after drinking a Best Day, and you're also going to remember what you did last night, which is almost as refreshing as a Best Day itself. So the next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day, or order one on your next Alaska flight, or you can always buy some on Amazon or over at bestdaybrewing.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Thinking about you in high school, are you mature beyond your years? Because it sounds like you worked 2 jobs for a few years in high school just to save up that money to be able to move out right when you turn 18. Most kids don't have that discipline. Was it just something different about you and how you guys were raised?
100% how we were raised. You know, my dad, both my parents are like the hardest working people I know. They're just always on the grind. And, you know, that's kind of how life was when I grew up. It was like, you know, on weekends when kids were just playing and doing stuff, it's like, yeah, you can go play with your friends, but first you got to do these chores and you got to do this. It's all work before play. So that's how I was raised. And it was like, if you want something, work hard enough and you can get it. And that's something that was really instilled in me my entire childhood. So I think it was more of that. It was just like, I knew I wanted to leave. I knew I needed to pay for my car. I needed to pay for where I was going to move and all the things. Like, there's no free ride for me. So if you want it, work hard and you can have it. And it was that simple to me.
You pretty much move right when you graduate and head on out there?
Yeah, basically, I spent the summer at home working for my dad and stacking some ducats. So I had a little something to come out with. But yeah, as soon as I was done with high school, I was out.
How freeing is that when you're 18 years old and you can just head out to go ski and live your dreams? Is that like just the best feeling in the world for a kid like that?
Oh my God, dude. Yeah, it's like unexplainable. Just like hearing you say it and like me, like reliving it. Yeah, that's powerful. That's a cool thing.
Yeah. And then when you move out there, it's not like you're this badass skier. You might be on your like 200 vertical foot hill, but when you get to a place with powder and you have to figure out how to ski powder and you have to learn a whole lot of things, I would think at Kirkwood, how long does it take you to really ski? Because I think you get out there in what, like 2002 or somewhere right around there?
Yeah, it was 2002. Yep, right on. I remember that first year because I only had those skinny Rossi Bandit X.
Not the triple X, you had the X.
The X, dude, the single X.
Yeah.
That thing was probably 80 underfoot,
Yep.
or even if it was that wide. But I remember I was just struggling, especially in like Sierra cement. It's not like the most forgiving powder. It's like kind of grabby and difficult. And my cousin's buddy was like, "Hey, dude, you've been struggling. You can borrow my skis for this pow day." And so I took his skis out. And of course, I hit this tiny little air, but I landed on a rock and just blew out the sidewall of his ski. And it's just one of those things when you're 19 or whatever, like, I can't afford to buy this guy new skis. And, when you fully compress the edge and blow out the sidewall, it's not just like a shop fix. The ski's toast.
Yeah, you just bought $600 worth of ski right there.
Oh, dude, I felt so bad. Luckily, he was super cool about it and like didn't make a huge deal. The shop guys did their best, and I think that was kind of the end of the story. I probably owe him a new pair of skis. I should probably help him out now that I got the ability to.
Yeah, man. And you don't even have to send him a brand new pair. You just have to send him one with a good pair of edges that's pretty wide. And you're like, hey, here's the return. He would be stoked. So what, it took you a few years to learn how to ski well?
I think so, man. Like I was saying, I was really into like jumping at that point in my life and like terrain parks and skiing around Kirkwood, though. I saw this guy, Craig Garbiel, who became one of my really good friends and a mentor to me. But it's like, you see the sick skiers when you're riding the chairlift and you're like, whoa, what's up with this guy? And, I think everyone does it. You see someone who's like ripping, you can't help but like break your neck and look over the chair as this person goes ripping by. I mean, I still do it to this day. But I just started chasing him around and following him. And he's like, what's up, dude? He's like, let's rip. And he really mentored me and, kind of following him and learning his style and how to like match transitions. And he's the one who got me into big mountain competing as well. And, it was a couple of years, like you said. And then he's like, dude, I've been doing these big mountain comps. I think you could do really well at them. And Craig talked me into doing my first competition. And then I ended up doing a bunch of the tour stops with him. And that was really cool.
What was the first comp that you did where you actually were like, holy shit, I can do really well here? Did you do well right away?
I don't think so. I'm trying to remember. I think I did a couple comps and it didn't go super well. There was this Kirkwood comp I did in 2005.
Okay.
And I forget if I did some comps before this. My memory serves right. I had done a couple comps before. Craig had talked me into like snowboard and let's say Jackson, because I don't remember. But they didn't go super well. I just wanted to do giant backflips off cliffs and stuff like that. And I think I like exploded on both the runs. But at any rate, there was this comp at Kirkwood in 2005. And he was kind of mentoring me, like I said. And I'm like, you know what? I've been watching these comps. I just want to ski in the fall line and like not be doing, because people are like traversing over to hit cliffs and get points and this and that. And so I just picked this super fall line run. And this is back when it was 3 days of competition. So I won the qualifier. And then day one on the main competition, I won day one. So then it was the finals on day three. And, up there with the big dogs, and they've made a cut as like the top 20, let's say. And I did this nasty line and like got hung up and did one of those quick like punch fronts, but still kept ripping.
Yep.
And I was like, oh man, such a bummer. I don't get to go to the super final. They used to have this thing called the super final where they'd take the top 10 back up there. And I ended up getting into the super final because they didn't give me a full dock for the crash, the punch front. And at any rate, I got back up there and I was in 10th place and I won that run and ended up 4th or something, just off the podium. And I remember coming down at the end of that run, just so psyched because I did the same line, but cleaned it. And this Rossi rep came up to me and he's like, "Hey, dude, we like what we're seeing here. How about we send you some free skis?" I was like, "Holy shit, dude, like I'm sponsored, no way." And it's like, that was such a cool moment, man. What a cool moment in life.
Was that the first time anybody went out of their way to give you something to help your skiing?
Oh, 100%.
And how long are you on? I mean, did Rossi last until 2012 when you get on Salomon?
No, Rossi was kind of a short stint. Let's see. I want to say there was like 3 years or something, maybe 4 years with Rosignol. But, when I was doing those comps, there was never any like true sponsorship. It was like I was paying for everything, paying for all the comps, paying for hotels. I was losing money. And especially because the prize purses were pretty bad. It was like $500 or something. Or like it was.
I mean, like 2011, I would think one of the biggest comps of your entire life. You're at Kirkwood, which is your home. And that's got to be so important for you to like perform at home in front of everybody that you know at that point, because you're definitely a known entity in that world. And the North American Free Skiing Championships come there. I think it's like 2 or 3 huge backflips off cliffs. And you end up winning that thing. When you win that event and you're the best in North America, you win $500.
It wasn't much, Mike. Don't quote me on that because maybe it was 1,000, but certainly no more than $1,000.
So your life when you were going to contests in the winter, because like you're working all summer long being a carpenter, saving up your money and just shredding all winter because that's the lifestyle that you want to live. And so your life is 1 week at Kirkwood, but then the next comp is going to be in Taos and you're going to drive all the way to Taos. It's going to take you 30 hours to drive there. You're going to spend a shit ton of money and probably get in a hotel room with like 15 people dirtbagging it, I'm guessing. Was that how you lived life for like 5-6 years?
Oh, dude, like closer to a decade. Skiing has always been number one. I don't know why I've been so in love with it. I think it's probably just the feeling of being in the moment and that escape from reality and truly being in the moment and truly being 100% there, not like thinking of other things, not thinking about life or anything else. And yeah, I've been committed to it for a long time. And that was always it. I was just like, man, maybe if I keep doing well in these comps, then maybe I can get sponsored and maybe I can keep continuing to do this. And yeah, it was a long grind, dude. But finally.
2011, we said you won that North American Free Skiing Championships. That's a huge one for you. When you win that thing and you win it at home and all of your friends are there, first and foremost, when you think about who you're competing against, who are the competitors back then? Is it like Drew and Julian and people like that? Or who are you competing against?
Yeah, exactly. And that was actually a hybrid. So the Freeride World Tour had started right around that time as well.
2013 or something. They like the things merged and most people got a bid into the Freeride World Tour, but a couple unlucky people didn't or something like that.
Yeah, totally. And it was even a little bit earlier than that. I want to say it was like 2009 or something.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this event, and I was one of those guys that didn't get adopted onto the Freeride Tour. So I was still like grinding on the free ski North American Tour. But that comp I won at Kirkwood was the first comp where the Freeride World Tour and the Free Ski World Tour joined forces. So to me, that was like the biggest accomplishment of that win, or the coolest thing about that win was not only did I beat all the free ski guys, but I also beat the Freeride World Tour guys. So that was a cool moment for me.
So you end up winning that thing. It's a huge moment from you. All the Euros, everyone is there. And you're known for going one speed on the mountain. I mean, I'm going to talk about it more in the podcast, but are you like that at the bar when you celebrate too? I mean, I know a lot of Midwesterners love to throw down some beers and some whiskey. Where do you fit into that whole world?
Oh, yeah, dude. I'm like trying to get better at that. But
I mean, you're older now, but when you were younger, were you really sending it with the boys?
Oh, yeah, 100%. It's like going to war out there with the boys. And then, at the end of the day, everyone's just like relieved and like drinking beers and reliving the moments. So, yeah, we definitely sent pretty hard and partied super hard. And no question.
And then around this point in life, I'm going to say, like summertime for you, it seemed like sending cliff jumps in Tahoe a la Brandon Beck was a huge part of your activities. Would that be fair to say as well?
Yeah, man, I love cliff jumping. It's super fun.
And what's the biggest cliff that you've jumped off of into water?
We measured one with a rope, and when we measured it, we just like measured with our arms, like I'm 5'6" and I put my hands against the wall and it's basically my height, that technique. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we just like kind of measured it out and counted, and we got it like right around 92 feet or something. But that was the only one I measured. I think I did a bigger one on Lake Powell, but didn't measure it, and who knows. It definitely, once you start getting to that height, like the impact is pretty heavy if there's no like broken up water. So I kind of like sticking more to like 60-ish range where you get nice floaty air time, but not as impactful.
And are you just throwing like doubles and triples and just, like all the stuff I see on Instagram?
Yeah, no triples for me. I wish, but I don't got the balls for that. But yeah, I love doing dub gainers and been working on some spinning rotations as well, dubs. So it's just fun. It's a fun activity to pass time in the summer.
What's the most you've scared yourself cliff jumping into water?
Well, I don't know. That's hard to say. Definitely just when you're about to like try a new trick that you think you can do and you're like visualizing it, and the stakes are high. I hate to admit it, but I've landed in the hospital twice now from cliff jumping.
Whoa.
From like, no, over rotating. Maybe it was only one time in the hospital, but like an over rotation or an under rotation where you just like get smacked against the water. And I had internal bleeding. Like I think my spleen was bleeding or something like that. Yeah, pretty rugged. But yeah, like that's, I think, a thing people like don't realize about cliff jumping into water. Like it's pretty serious. And if you mess up, it can kill you, right? And I'm sure you've seen the Russian swing thing that we've been setting up in recent years. And that's just super fun. And like we've had some good spanks on that with other people. I've done pretty good myself. Oh, you're right. I did get a triple on that.
Okay.
But not off a straight cliff. But yeah, man, it's so fun. I just love like pushing yourself like that, and yeah, having the vision and knowing you can do something, and knowing that all the training and practice you do is paying off. And yeah, it's super rewarding.
Another risky thing that you do is base jumping. And when did you start skydiving, and how long until you started base jumping after that?
Oh, a lot of people aren't going to like this answer. I did my first base jump before I'd ever flown a canopy. It was something that Shane McConkey called death camp.
Yes, I've heard of that. I've just been told I was going to do it with him, but he died, and then I decided I didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, fair. So you're aware of death camp. The idea behind it was you take your friend to the bridge in Idaho, the Prime Bridge. I think it's like, let's just call it 450 feet. And you throw them off the bridge, and then flying a base canopy is relatively easy. If there's no winds or anything weird, you can just be like, all right, dude, kind of fly that thing towards the river and land in the water. And, you do a PCA, which is called pilot shoot assist, and that snaps your canopy out of the container like right away. So there's no real room for error for like you getting stuck upside down in the canopy wrapping around your legs or anything weird like that. So this is how I did my first jump. And then it's like, okay, this is insane. This is crazy. And then you're cut off. And then they're like, all right, go learn to skydive. Go learn the tools. This is just to give you the taste and see what you think. I think that was the idea behind the death camp. And that's how I was brought in, because my mentor was brought in by Shane in that same fashion. So hence why I was brought into the sport that way.
Did you have to write a letter to your family on why you wanted to die?
No, my poor parents, though, man. I do feel bad for my mom, especially.
That was one of the things that Shane said that we had to do. So is McConkey a huge influence on you? I guess just with all your backflips, the way that you ski. I mean, to me, it looks like McConkey and Seth have to be big influences on you, but who are they?
Yeah, 100%, man. Like, I honestly wasn't even really like into ski films or aware of them until I want to say a junior or senior in high school. My brother was going to school in Western Michigan, which is just a few hours away. And he came back to visit the family and showed me Sixth Sense by MSP. And I remember just being blown away because, like I said, at this point in my life, I'd seen Johnny Mosley do the 360 mute, but I had never seen like what the new Canadian Air Force was doing. And I had no idea who these guys were. And it was just like, again, like jaw dropped, like, holy shit, this is like the most badass thing I've ever seen. So after that, I was like addicted to the MSP films. So I would buy their films every year. I've still got a nice collection of VHS.
Nice.
Of Sixth Sense, Ski Movie, Global Storming, all of the old classics, or my classics anyway. But that was like really what influenced me. And then like seeing Seth Morrison do these like monumental backflips was just like mind melting, right? And I was like really at that point in my life where I was learning to flip and jump off everything. And I thought that was really cool. And then Shane started doing the ski base stuff. And I was like, whoa, dude. Like, I love free fall. I love cliff jumping. I love all these same things. Like, why wouldn't this be like a natural progression? Of course I want to do this. That looks so fun. So yeah, those guys were definitely huge influences on my life. And that's what got me into base jumping, 100%.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm starting this one out with Outdoor Research. Have you seen that black and white Mark Abma kit online or in the new MSP movie? If you haven't seen it yet, look them up before you buy your gear for this winter. They're sick. And not only are OR's products built differently and outperform just about anything thanks to being athlete and employee tested here in the brutal conditions of the Pacific Northwest, nowadays they have so much more style than the OR gear from just 10 years ago. When you bring in athletes like Mark Abma, Micah Evangelista, Zoe Atkin, Tom and Bass Van Steenbergen, and many more, and you have them sit down and work with designers and marketers, it's no wonder why the cuts and styles are looking a little bit different than that climbing-inspired OR gear that you used to see. It's really a game-changing difference in the fit and function of the gear, and the look, well, it really is incredible. And with the holidays right around the corner, get someone in your life the gift that will last over time. I can honestly say that I've loved OR since I bought my first raincoat from them back in 2000, and they truly make my ski days better. And while I may not be the best skier in the world, my Outdoor Research kit makes me look like a pro. And you can do the same thing by heading over to outdoorresearch.com, looking around the site, and treating yourself to the best. My final sponsor is Stanley. And when Stanley started sponsoring this podcast, the story around the brand was that green bottle that keeps your grandpa's coffee hot. And that's still a story, but this week, they're totally changing the script. Actually, this year or the past few years, they're changing this script. And the latest big news around the brand is that they've signed Messi. The most famous soccer player in the world is part of the Stanley family. And while Stanley still sponsors me and Matchstick Productions, and most likely a snowboard movie that I don't know about, they've really matured as a brand over the years. I mean, they are the hottest or coldest cup in the world, and it feels like it. And it's still all about the product. Well, marketing with Messi and Olivia sure does help things, but if you don't have a great product, the marketing doesn't matter. And since Stanley has consistently had the best cups and bottles to keep things hot or cold since they invented the category in 1913, you need to check out what they're doing. While I still swear by the pint glasses that I use every day, which could be a perfect Christmas gift for the man in your life, I see so many other people out there drinking with that Quencher cup, which is so popular. And I get it. For some reason, it makes you drink so much more water, and that's awesome. Really, these days, Stanley has something for everyone, and I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley purchases. How am I going to do that? Well, when you head over to stanley1913.com and go shopping, then you check out, you want to enter the code POWELL30, that's a capital POWELL, no spaces, the number 30, and you'll save 30% on all Stanley gear. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Do you ever get to ski or jump with Shane?
Yeah, I did get to ski with Shane at Squaw one day. It was pretty embarrassing. We were making this film called Line Score. Me and some buddies were like documenting the Free Ski World Tour, again, before the Free Ride World Tour. So this was my first time like filming, right? And we're meet up with Shane because he was like a big part of the IFSA and creating like this organization that was against FIS, if you will.
Yeah.
And so we go to like interview him, and then we're like, oh, dude, can we like ski some laps? And so we go do some laps on KT. And then he takes us down this run. I don't even know what it's called, but I end up like missing this turn. I'm like trying to avoid my buddy because we're all trying to keep up with Shane, right?
Right.
We're all skiing too fast. And I go to avoid my friend, and I go launching off a cliff and land on the cat road down below and break my skis in half. I'm just like laying there wadded up on the road. And Shane like looks over at me. He's like, oh, JT did that the first time I skied with him. I was like, oh my God. I was so embarrassed. But apparently JT Holmes did the same thing. So
you're in good company there. Yeah, you're in good company there. And then when you think about it, skiing, cliff jumping, or base jumping, what feels the scariest to you?
Oof, I think base jumping for sure. There's always just that element of, shit goes sideways. There's not much margin for error. So definitely base.
Okay. And then speaking of fear, the way you ski, it's at Mach speed on everything. Your lines are top to bottom with no easy way down and no slowing down. And the conditions really don't seem to ever matter. It's like you ski the same when it's bulletproof as when it's POW. How do you pull that off? Is that just coming from like skiing shitty places in the Midwest all the time, or from just shitty Freeride World Tour events?
Yeah, I think a combination of both, man. And also like, I think the mentality of the Midwest too, of just like not giving a shit and being like, well, this is what the conditions are and we're going to go ski regardless. Yeah. And then developing those skills, the Free Ski World Tour, and not letting that dictate whether I'm going to ski or not. I ski with a lot of pro skiers that are pretty fair weather skiers. And it's like, dude, I don't give a shit. If there's snow and we can ski, and like firm snow is actually more predictable. You know exactly how to land, exactly what you're going to get on your outruns, etc. So yeah, it doesn't bug me that much. I kind of enjoy it.
Okay. Well, I think the huge trip that changes everything for you in skiing, it's 2012. You'd gotten to know Casey Dean on the Free Skiing World Tour. He invites you to Grant Gunderson's house to shoot at Baker. I think you shoot with Grant for a couple days. And then who's the crew that comes in town?
Yeah, so we were shooting with Gundy, and then the Solomon Free Ski guys show up. And it was Chris Rubens, Cody Townsend, Elise Sogstead, Jeff Thomas was filming. And I want to say there was one more skier. It may have been Abma. But, dude, I remember I was just hanging out with Gundy, and I had honestly just met him. And these guys come walking in the door, and I was honestly just like kind of starstruck, like, holy shit. But I was also like, hey, can I like come hang out with you guys tomorrow? And they're all kind of like, yeah, we're kind of filming, dude. We got shit to do.
When you invite yourself on someone else's film trip, is that kind of like a weird, awkward thing to do? People usually don't do that.
Mike, I didn't even realize. I wasn't like established or knowing like even how the game goes at that point. I was a big mountain skier, and this was my first time shooting photos with Gunderson, and we were having like some productive days. And so then these guys are like, Gundy's shooting with us and we're filming. I was like, cool, can I like tag along? And like, you guys go first, of course. I understand that. Like, you guys go get your shots, and then I just want to try and shoot some photos with Grant after. So maybe after you guys do that, then I can get a POW turn shot or whatever. And they were kind of like, kind of on. Everyone's like, oh, fuck. How do we tell this guy to FO? But at any rate, I don't know why, but they allowed me to come along. And that first day, it was a super windy day. We kind of hiked up the arm at Mount Baker, and we kind of go off this line, and everyone's kind of taking their turns. And of course, I'm the last to go. And Chris Rubens hits this little cliff, and I was like, oh, dude, he kind of went small off that thing. I'm going to boost that thing. And so I just backed up and teed this massive backflip off the thing. So big. It was probably like 50 feet. And as I'm coming around on the backy, the wind catches my tips. And like I said, it was windy too. And it almost threw me back into a front flip. Like I was ready to put the landing gear down, and the wind speed against my tips threw me back into a front flip like I landed on my face. But the point is, that opened their eyes and they're like, wait, what's up with this guy? Why is he trying to go that big and do that big of a backflip? So then Jeff Thomas is like, all right, you can hang out. And so had a super productive week of filming with them. And it's funny because that Free Ski TV episode, I'm like this kid skiing in blizzard and strafe outerwear. And it's pretty funny because I was just kind of on fire that trip and skied really well. And then those guys all went to Solomon and vouched for me. And that was the year I won the tour. So the culmination of all those things kind of put me in good standing and a good position with Solomon.
And so it's incredible that all of them went to Solomon and had your back. Jeff Thomas, the whole crew. Everybody's like, we have to sign this guy because if we don't, someone else is, and he's going to be the best skier on their team. And for you, is it one of those things where, I mean, you do ski so much faster than everyone else, it seems like. I mean, like it reminds me of Seth. I feel like when I watch you ski, I kind of get nervous like when I watch Charlie Yeager ski because I don't know what's going to happen, but I know you're always going to land your shit. But it's just like you're always so on the edge and so fast, it's crazy. And then the way that you could care less about exposure and huge cliffs, it's kind of got that Seth thing. I was talking to someone else who said you kind of remind him of Hugo Harrison with the speed. So you take all of those things in and it's like you're the best of all of these three people. Can you see almost people's faces mind blown after like a day of skiing with you? Like all those strangers who didn't know that you were the points leader on the Free Ride World Tour, but then you showed them that like you ski like no one else they've seen in a long time. Can you see the smiles on their faces?
I honestly didn't get that vibe, man. I remember we kind of had this great day of skiing all together and those guys all carpooled up and I drove my truck solo. I was certainly like the outcast and I was like, oh, sweet. Like, I think I kind of like earned my way into the crew and everyone just like piled into Gundy's truck at the end of the day. And I drove all the way back to Bellingham by myself. I was like, oh man. So I don't think it was like that.
Is there any way, how do you describe your ski style?
How would I describe it? I would say it's fast and furious, balls to the wall.
Yeah, that's exactly what you do. And there is no anything else. It's all gas all the time, right?
Yeah, that's how I like to ski, man.
Okay. So yeah, I would think people do notice that. But either way, 2012, you win the Free Skiing Tour World Championship. Do you win more than $500 when you win the championship?
Maybe $1,500. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. Maybe it was $2,000. It certainly wasn't like notable, Mike. It wasn't like, oh, that time I won 50K or 30K. It was like $5,000 or less. I don't remember exactly. I want to say like $3,500 or $5,000 or something, maybe.
And you're one of the most exciting skiers to watch. Have you ever made more than like 80 or 100 grand a year skiing?
I don't think I've made 100 grand from skiing.
Okay. Well, that's good then. So you've done some good stuff with skiing. So it's definitely paid some bills. And, you know, one thing with your skiing, and it's like you shot with the Blank Collective and you shot with them for many, many years. And I kind of look at it like, why weren't you ever in an MSP or a TGR movie? Because like based on the way that you ski, I feel like 1 year in one of those movies would kind of put you in the upper echelon of names of skiers. And maybe you didn't push for yourself to get into one of those movies. Or how did that just never happen in your career?
I don't know. I think with Solomon sponsoring the Blank film, you know, that's like their bread and butter. It's just cheaper and easier to have like a bunch of their athletes filming with Blank, right? And yeah, unfortunately, I've never been given that opportunity. And you probably know better than me how much it's sponsorship related versus like the film company reaching out to your sponsor and being like, hey, we would like, you know, when you're working with K2, I'm sure you'd have TGR or someone ask you, be like, hey, we want so-and-so to shoot with us. And you would be like, yeah, we're going to get that budget together.
Did you ever have conversations with anybody? Because I feel like, I don't want to say you were shortchanged in that respect, but I feel like for every one person that sees the Blank movie, 7 people see the TGR movie, I feel like, just because of their marketing machine, given that's probably getting better with Blank movies. And Blank makes an incredible movie every year. But I feel like just not being in that upper echelon of movie has just never given you that exposure that you could have had.
Yeah, I agree, man. I would have loved to have a shot or had a shot, however you want to say it. But in the same breath, I'm super grateful for all the opportunities that I have had. And I've gotten some really cool experiences with the blank crew and getting to ski up in BC, and Alexi and Stan are basically my best buds. So it is cool in that sense that working with those guys isn't like work. It's just the homies shredding together. So I will say that's cool. But yeah, man, never got to go heli skiing.
Well, you filmed with Blank, and we could talk about them a lot, but there's not enough time. The one thing I do want to talk about is the Ender clip in Before Blank. That thing was so fucking huge, and you stomped the living shit out of it. What's the story behind that one?
Before Blank. So was that, it almost looks like a double stager?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that was actually Whistler area. And what's funny was I was skiing, filming with Alexi and our filmer, Scotty, and one other person, I think. And it just so happened that Abma rolls up, Legend rolls up, and I'm just like, oh shit, Abma's here. And then I started picking his brain. I was like, dude, look at that double step. And I was like, man, if I try and double that, I know I'm going to land on the rocks. You look at lines enough, you're like, it's not possible to double step that.
Right.
I was like, what do you think about singling it? You think that transition's good enough? And he and Alexi were like, I think you should do it. Yeah, go for it. And they were like getting all amped up. And I'm like, wait, are you guys just telling me to go for it because you want to see me go for it? Or do you think like I'm asking you, is this landable? And they're like, yeah, you got it, dude. You got it. So it was really cool that those guys were like egging me on and being supportive because, yeah, that definitely influenced it. And then I went back up and got the top of that thing. And then it's like super blind rollover, right? You're like, where's that takeoff again? You've only got like 2 turns to come into this takeoff and you can't even see it. And yeah, it worked out perfect. Just sniped the transition perfect. And I was psyched on that one.
Yeah, you stomped the shit out of it. That ends your segment there. And when you think about it, what's the biggest cliff that you stomped perfectly, where there's no backslap, no anything, where you just walked away, you felt nothing, everything was perfect, and you were like, man, that was it?
Shoot, that's definitely up there. I feel like after a certain point, like it's really hard to get that clean stomp once you're past like 50, 60 feet. What's best is when you can get those long and low where it's like the cliff's really raked out and you like super high speed takeoffs. Those are the best for matching transitions. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest ones I've like just stomped bolts.
Okay. And then when you think about the clip that defines your career, it's the road gap in 2019. You had been eyeing that thing forever. Everything kind of lined up for you, just like weather, conditions, everything, snow. Can you describe how big this thing is?
It's hard to truly describe how big that thing is. When you look over the edge, the landing's like 45 degrees steep. It's got to be at least 45 degrees. And when you look off the edge of that cliff, once you get to a certain point, you look off the edge of a cliff and it always looks flat. And that thing looks parking lot flat. Like you could almost barely tell the difference between the highway and the landing, So it was kind of like, all right, well, I know the transition's good. I know it's good, right? It's like a thing that you have to convince yourself of. And like it happens sometimes when you hit airs and cliffs skiing big mountain lines. You're like coming in for a landing. You're like, this feels flat, but put the landing gear down. So it's the same type of thing with that. I measured it at 90 feet to the road, to the highway.
Okay.
And I landed like, I would guess about 10 feet below the highway. I also measured it at 50 feet from the guardrail to the cliff. So I'm just doing a simple Pythagorean theorem. It was about 150 feet takeoff to landing. But yeah, that's really big. And it's funny, dude, because people gave me flack like, oh, that's not a stomp. And he backslapped and whatever. And it's like, well, first of all, I never said it was a stomp. Like in the clip, I say, it wasn't a stomp, but it's a win.
Yep.
But I don't think you're going to truly stomp something that big.
You landed it better the second time. I mean, you hit the thing twice and you landed it better the second time. What was crazy about the thing is like, you're up there and I think there was all this like stealth kind of building at night when people can't see you, come back the next morning. But right when you're getting ready to drop in or right when you're up there speed checking, there's cops out there and this isn't legal. Does that freak you out?
The best part about that is I was being all like cocky the night before. I was like, yeah, if the cops come and like tell me to come down, I'll be like, yeah, I'm coming down. And like, I was just talking shit, being arrogant. And then the cops show up, and then it's like this true oh shit moment. Like, oh, what am I going to do? It just added a whole nother level of stress. When you're doing something like this, your life is on the line. You need to be 100% focused, 100% in the moment, making sure the speed is right, that the lip feels right, trajectory is right, all of the things. And to have like the cops come, it just added this whole other element of like, oh shit, like, is this worth it? Do I need to do this? Like, is this worth going to jail for? All the thoughts. But they ended up being pretty cool because I hit it. It sounds like you already know, but the first time I hit the jump, my trajectory was just barely off because I built the lip in the dark. And there was literally one little pillow in the landing. And I landed right on that pillow, just exploded my skis off my feet, broke my bindings, broke one of my molars because I wasn't wearing a mouth guard. Of course, I was just psyched that I lived and that everything worked and like that I wasn't like seriously hurt. And I come hiking out and gather my shit. I start boot packing out. And right when I get to the top, the cop comes creeping by. And there's like a little turn out there. And I'm like, oh shit, here we go. And the cop doesn't even look at me. He just keeps rolling by. And I was like, oh shit, dude, I am hitting this thing again. My cousin, who I had just given my skis to like the week before, was sitting there with the same exact skis, same exact bindings. He's got the same boot sole length. And I was like, dude, can I use your skis? Because I broke my bindings on the impact of that pillow. And so he's like, yeah, dude, get up there. And so I went back up, but then I've got like these old clapped out skis that I've been like riding through gravel and core shotted. And I'm like, oh, these are going to be slower. Like, do I have the speed? It was this like big stressful thing again. And then, dude, again, a different cop shows up, parks in the middle of the highway, and he starts yelling at me and like my filmer. He's like, if you guys cause any accidents and blah, 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 I'm arresting you. That's a promise, not a threat, and blah, blah, blah. So I had this stress spike again, man. It was just like so stressful, Mike. It was very stressful.
Everybody's got to watch it. You definitely clean up the landing the second time. We won't call it a full-on stomp, and you didn't call it a full-on stomp. So whatever. It is one of the crazier things that you're going to see, and you end up living, which is all that really matters. The next big project in your world is Mountain State. This one is all about exploring the mountains of Nevada. And it's like you used to drive through to all these events, and you drive through Nevada, you'd see all these mountains, and you're like, man, I'd love to ski here. I'd love to ski there. But you're not stopping in Nevada. So eventually you do, and that's what this trip is all about. Who was Caligatha, and how did she add to the adventure?
Clagatha, dude. Yeah, so the clag is a term I've stolen from my Canadian counterparts. That's when you like get clouded in. You're like expecting sun, and then the clouds roll in and it just clags, and it basically ruins any filming opportunities. You can't see its flat light. The features go away.
Yep.
But Clagatha is my camper that I got for the Mountain State project, so we could go camp in the middle of nowhere. It's probably one of the most key team players to the Mountain State project. And I named her Clagatha because every time we go to Nevada, we're checking the weather, we're looking for good weather windows. And it's like, oh yeah, we got a week of sunshine. And so we go drive 6 hours into the desert on the middle of BFE. And then all of a sudden it's just clagged in. Like we get 5 days of clouds and you can't see anything. And then we get like 1 day of sunshine. And so the weather reports, I think it's just because no one lives out there really, that they don't really give a shit or do like a good forecast, because we have not had good luck with the forecasting there. But that's the story of Clagatha and how she got her name.
And so you go access these peaks in Nevada, and that's like a totally hard thing to do. I'm sure there's a ton of challenges, and I could talk about it, but we're not going to either because of time. We're going to talk about in Mountain State 2.0, you go to Belmont, a ghost town, and that place like scared the living shit out of you, I heard. Can you talk about that place?
I guess the freaky thing about Belmont was we ran into these crazy retired guys that were probably in their 50s who had made a bunch of money off the internet. One guy off of gaming, another guy off of parts, like selling motorcycle parts. And these guys like have this land they bought there. And we ended up meeting these guys barbecuing. They had this like cool old bar and we're like shooting their cannon. But these guys were loose and they're like crazy alcoholics and they're both like holstering guns. And then they start getting in arguments. And it was like all of a sudden we went from like laughing and good vibes to like these guys are like arguing and fighting. And I'm just trying to like calm everyone down. Like, hey, guys, it's like not a big deal. But yeah, we were in like this really weird predicament there because we had just finished a ski trip, right? We were like coming out of the mountains, came through this little town, and there these guys were. And so we just started bullshitting with them, and it all started out good. And then, yeah, that was the scary thing in Belmont for sure.
Did you guys get to use shock therapy machines or something like that?
Oh, yeah, dude. Yeah, that's awesome. I forgot about that.
And you like shot cannons and shit like that too?
Yeah, dude, we shot cannons off. The dude had like this old Civil War cannon. You know, we basically just stuffed it with gunpowder. And then he's like, oh, yeah, you fill it with like toilet paper or something. So you get like a good blast. So then when it shoots out, you just get this big red fireball, if you will. So that was super fun. And my buddy Trevor Simmons was just like loading the cannon nonstop. We must have gone through a bunch of this guy's gunpowder. It was hilarious. And then, yeah, he had like this bear trap. And then it was funny because he got to this certain point where he could tell that I was like very mechanically inclined. And then he'd be like giving me these riddles and puzzles to solve. And then he's like, oh, check out this old printing press I got from the 1800s. And his printing press wasn't working right. And so I'm like, whoa, what's going on with this? And then I started troubleshooting just because that's kind of how I am. And I ended up fixing his printing press from the 1800s. There's like this bent metal rod in there, and I pulled it out. Like, I was like, you got any tools? And then we like pulled this thing out and I fixed it. Yeah, it was a wild night, dude. It was pretty epic and something you could never replicate.
All right. So one thing I didn't talk about when we were talking about the Blank Collective and your video parts with them, and you could even include some of your Mountain State project, but like when you think of parts that if you wanted to show someone, this is what my skiing looks like, what is the one that you're most proud of?
Oh, man, that's tough. You know, I think being who I am and trying to be a perfectionist and wanting things to always be perfect, I've never really been like super proud of any segment. I always wish I had cleaned things up or had more tricks and had more of this or had more of that. So I would have to like take a compilation of all of them, to be honest. But oof, I think one of my favorite films was 7 Stages of Blank. That was, I think, the 2019 film with the road gap. At any rate, yeah, I think that's just who I am. It's never enough, and I always want more and always wish it was better, but that's definitely one of my favorite segments because it's very Tahoe-oriented, and I know we got to ski some really cool terrain.
Okay, the last thing I'm going to ask you about is your recent world record ski base. That was absolutely crazy, and it could have been more awesome, but it didn't go as planned. What was the goal, and what happened?
Basically, the goal was just there is this road gap that I've always looked at that I was like, this would be so cool if you could ski base this. And years ago, I went up there to check it out and see if it went. And it didn't really have the speed. There used to be a cabin right in the way. And then the Caldor fire happened. And the Caldor fire was a massive wildfire that burned down basically all of El Dorado County, which is where South Lake Tahoe is situated. And once that happened, now this cabin was gone. And now it opened up a corridor into that cliff that I wanted to jump off. Still, there wasn't the speed. It's pretty flat up there. So I started just daydreaming about how I could get the speed. Quickly, I realized you just need a high-speed winch. I just put a message out on Instagram story I was like, hey, anyone have a high-speed winch that I can use? And one of my buddies, Josh Gold, reached out to me, and he lives on the North Shore of Tahoe. And he's like, hey, dude, I've got a high-speed winch that he's been using for like wakeboarding and stuff like that. So I was like, holy shit, this could work. And so we got this high-speed winch. We did a bunch of test pulls. I went up there, built a jump, and basically just did a bunch of testing. I did a bunch of testing runs up there days before and the day of the jump before I decided that I felt like I had the speed and that it all was good to go. And then, yeah, once I was confident with it and feeling confident in the speed and all the variables, there was nothing left to do but do it. And unfortunately, my canopy had a 90 off heading. I also lost a bunch of speed on the in run. If I could go back, I would have salted the in run. And yeah, I had a 90 off heading, which means my canopy turned 90 degrees. And then I crashed into the hillside like immediately upon opening, like a 1 second canopy ride. 2 seconds, probably.
Yeah, and everybody should check that out. I think that's on your Instagram. Everyone should check out your Instagram because not only do you have that clip on there, but there's so many jaw-dropping clips. And when I say you ski like no other, everybody's going to see that in your Instagram because it's pretty much all videos of top to bottom lines that nobody else would ski like you ski them. So everyone should check that out. That's the podcast. Now it's time for Inappropriate Questions. And I was able to get one of the funniest Canadian people that you know that's also an insane skier to ask the questions. And while he may hit things a little bit slower and a little bit smaller, Stan Rey is one of the best out there, and his inappropriate questions should be laugh out loud funny. And we're going to jump into it right now. Here we go.
All right, Josh, number one, why do you hate on peeing sitting down?
Well, I guess I don't hate it. It's just, it was a funny thing that came up with the Solomon team. One year we have this annual meeting at the Mountain Collective, and one of the guys on the team said something about he pees sitting down. And I mean, not to be macho or anything, but when I pee, I stand up and I pee.
I do too. I mean, I've sat down and peed before, but it's very rare and I've had a lot of drinks and I can't even remember when I've done it, but I'm sure I have, but I usually stand up 99.9% of the time I am standing.
Yeah. And so I like made comments to the other guys like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then it like started coming out like Stan and Alexi were like, well, yeah, I like sit down and pee. And then like Rubens and some of the other guys like started saying it. And then I became like this outcast because I don't sit down and pee. And I think it was just like a Canadian thing. It seemed to be all the Canadian skiers on the team sit down and pee. And I was kind of the only one who didn't, I guess, because the team's mostly Canadian. And there I was making myself an outcast again.
So they really do sit down and pee. They weren't just all ganging up to make you feel awkward. Like it's weird that you didn't pee. That's just how they roll is they're like sit down peers.
I mean, I've been trying to get a more straight answer out of that, but I think it's like they sit down and want to watch Instagram while they pee and just take their time and enjoy it. I have no idea, dude. It's pretty weird and awkward to me, but yeah, probably they're just trying to make me feel like a dummy or make me feel bad or whatever, but.
All right, them crazy Canadians will go into question number 2.
What is the craziest thing you've done on Halloween?
The craziest thing I've done on Halloween was actually a pretty fun one. One of my buddies hit me up and was like, hey, I got this idea for Halloween. What if we go to Vegas and we dress up like the presidents from Point Break and we go like base jump off a bunch of buildings and stuff. So it's pretty fun. That's one of the funnest parts of base jumping, I think, is because a lot of them are illegal and you're like sneaking around and trying to figure out how you can get away with things. But we ended up like jumping a hot air balloon, which wasn't illegal. The guy was aware we were going to jump out of it. But we also jumped like 3 casinos, and Halloween night, we went to this party and we devised this plan. Our buddy dressed as a minion, and we had to go through metal detectors to get to this rooftop party. So we snuck the parachutes, all of our rigs in the minion costume. And we get into this party And it's like pretty much game on. Like you got to jump over this railing and do like a 10-foot drop down into this little sub railing to the exit point. And we went out there and I just kind of got a bad vibe. There was like security in the LZ and I was like, I'm not going to get arrested over this. So I pulled the plug and I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'll drive the car, get away, like whatever you guys want to do. And then they got all mad at me and then they all decided they didn't want to do it either. But then we went over to the Luxor, which is like the pyramid-shaped hotel.
Yeah.
And my buddy decided he wanted to jump the inside of the Luxor. And so then we like devised a way to, I think we ended up buying a room so we could get to the top of the Luxor. And my buddy jumped the inside of the Luxor and it was like this crazy getaway. We had this getaway car and then you're like running through the casino. And, you know, when a canopy opens, it's so loud. And just the crack and the echo throughout that building was crazy and just turned everyone's head there. So yeah, that was a pretty wild event, pretty wild Halloween. It was super fun.
Have you ever gotten in trouble for base jumping? Like it's all fun and games until you get in trouble or until there's an accident, but it doesn't seem like you've had an accident. Have you had a close call?
I have had a close call. Yeah, I almost drowned in the Snake River under the Prime Bridge once, jumping in the winter. And when I landed in the water, I didn't realize how big of a deal it was because I've landed in water before in summer times and, you know, you can swim out and it's not this big deal. And when I jumped and landed in the water in the winter, it was like freezing cold. And I'm like, oh, this sucks. And I didn't realize how big of trouble I was in. I was just trying to grab my gear and then you're swimming with this like anchor basically.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I was starting to get hypothermic and I couldn't like get my equipment off me because it was dragging me down. And you know, I honestly thought that I was going to die that day. It was pretty wild. But I was able to like grab an air bubble in the canopy and just like slowly kick my way to shore. And it was like a lifeboat, like a little rescue boat. Yeah, so that was super lucky, super scary. Pretty humbling experience for sure.
I can imagine, yeah. And then have you been in trouble? Have you gotten caught?
I've never got caught. I know I've had to hide a couple times. Had to hide one time at Forest Hill Bridge. Maybe that was the only time. But it's always like kind of this crazy feeling like you're about to get caught. You know, you can't like really breathe till you're out of the area and like, oh, fuck, we got away with it. Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine there's like a lot of camaraderie built behind the sneaking around, breaking and entering, doing all that shit. Then everybody gets their adrenaline rush and then it's back to the crew getting away.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all just like happens within a couple minutes. And you're like, wow, that was a lot of effort for that 2 minutes of adrenaline or 30 seconds of adrenaline or whatever, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, we will jump into your final inappropriate question.
Why were you lying in the middle of the Alaskan highway?
Oh, shit. Well, I guess we're going full disclosure here. So we were in a cave. We were camped up on Haynes Pass for like 3 weeks. We barely skied. And at a certain point, you're just like bored, going stir crazy. And Stan and I and Alexi were drinking all day. And then we decided to eat some hallucinogenics. We ate some mushrooms and we were doing skateboard laps down the Haynes Pass. And at a certain point, we had done like a bunch of laps. We were literally lapping with our snow machines. We'd jump on the sleds, wrap up, double up, and then we'd like skate way down the highway. And Stan and I were just laying there and laughing in the road and talking bullshit. And then we were just like sitting on the ground. Then we were laying there looking up at the sky. And then we're like, dude, we're laying in the middle of the highway. We should probably get up. That's that. It honestly was really fun. And I'm sure people listening will think this is like super dangerous, but I can assure you that 5 cars a day drive that highway and you can hear them coming.
That's Inappropriate Questions. That's our podcast. And the way you ski, it's like I said earlier, it's surprising that you aren't much bigger of a name, but you still are a big name. I mean, if Scott Stevens is every skier's favorite snowboarder, it's like you're every pro skier's favorite skier. And that's a tribute to the way that you ski, and game recognizes game. And everybody I talk to is like, no, Josh is the best skier out there. So no one skis like you do. It's always exciting to watch. I thank you for sharing your story, and I thank you for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate the compliments, Mike. That was cool to relive some of those moments from childhood too that you kind of sparked that I've forgotten about. So appreciate that.
So that was time with Josh Daiek. And if you haven't seen Josh ski, search for footage of him online. He's one of the most exciting skiers on the planet, and it's a shame that not everyone knows that. What's even crazier is his age. While most people slow down, that hasn't started for Josh yet, and he's in his 40s. That doesn't surprise me though. With his blue-collar work ethic and love of skiing, he's a lifer. And since he has a program of carpentry in the summer and skiing all winter, he's got that life figured out. So while it's a shame that Josh has been somewhat underground during his long ski career, those that are plugged into the sport include Josh in their legendary list of great ascenders of our time. That's the podcast. At this point, I want to ask you to review the show wherever you listen. If you like it, please say something so other people can read it too, and then they'll find the podcast as well. That's greatly appreciated. What is also appreciated is supporting my sponsors. I only work with the best brands in the industry, and they are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Best Day Brewing, and Ski Idaho. Have a great week, everyone.